Welcome to Devotionary, where we make the Bible accessible and applicable. We don't always know what to do, and depending upon the given situation, we can sometimes run the risk of doing the wrong thing. That's when it pays to have friends who can step in and give us wise input. In 1 Samuel chapter 25, verses 18 through 31, we find David so angry at Nabal's disdainful treatment of his men and disrespectful attitude that he's close to taking the fool's life. But Abigail, the wife of Nabal, will step into the middle of the mess, providing wise and godly counsel to David that will prevent him from doing something he would later regret. Sometimes God places others in our life to direct and protect us from ourselves. David was justifiably angry, but the worst thing he could do was allow a fool to goad him into doing something rash. Nabal had gotten the best of David, pushing all the right buttons to get the man after God's own heart to respond in an ungodly way. But Abigail would preserve the life of her foolish husband and protect the integrity of David's name by giving him wise and godly counsel. In these verses, we're provided with a stark contrast between Nabal and Abigail, and it shows up in their speech, their choice of words. When Nabal had first encountered the men sent by David, he responded rashly and rather harshly. "Who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants these days who are breaking away from their masters. Shall I take my bread and my water and my meat that I have killed for my shearers and give it to men who come from I do not know where?" 1 Samuel 25, verses 10 through 11. Nabal treated David's men with disrespect and dishonor. His words were flippant and filled with disdain. All the time that his shepherds had been tending his flocks in the wilderness of Paran, David and his men had provided protection. One of Nabal's own shepherds confirmed this fact when he appealed to Abigail to intervene. "These men have been very good to us, and we never suffered any harm from them. Nothing was stolen from us the whole time they were with us. In fact, day and night they were like a wall of protection to us and the sheep." 1 Samuel 25, verses 15 through 16. And yet Nabal refused to acknowledge any of this and treated David with contempt rather than showing him gratitude. He was a fool. He fit the biblical definition of a fool. Wise words bring approval, but fools are destroyed by their own words. Ecclesiastes 10, verse 12. Fools' words get them into constant quarrels. They are asking for a beating. The mouths of fools are their ruin. They trap themselves with their lips. Proverbs 18, verses 6 through 7. And Nabal was about to get a beating from David. In fact, David was planning on wiping out Nabal and every one of his men. A lot of good it did to help this fellow. We protected his flocks in the wilderness, and nothing he owned was lost or stolen. But he has repaid me evil for good. May God strike me and kill me if even one man of his household is still alive tomorrow morning. 1 Samuel 25, verses 21 through 22. But cooler heads prevailed. Abigail, the wife of Nabal, when apprised of the situation, stepped in and determined to right the wrong her husband had done to David. This was probably not the first time she had been forced to intervene in her husband's affairs. She was well aware of his reputation, and as his wife, she had first-hand experience with his foolishness. She was extremely blunt when describing him to David. "I know Nabal is a wicked and ill-tempered man. Please don't pay any attention to him. He is a fool, just as his name suggests." 1 Samuel 25, verse 25. But it was her words of reconciliation to David that provide us with the greatest insight into the difference between Abigail and her husband. Her words and actions were marked by wisdom and insight, and what she exhibited was far more than mere human intelligence. She was not just a smart woman, she was a godly woman. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. Proverbs 9, verse 10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All those who practice it have a good understanding. Psalm 111, verse 10. Abigail was wise because she was godly. She feared the Lord. She saw the hand of God at work in the life of David. God had provided her with insight into the circumstances surrounding David's life. While Nabal saw David simply as a man on the run, a fugitive from justice, Abigail saw him as the next king of Israel. The Lord will surely reward you with a lasting dynasty, for you are fighting the Lord's battles. 1 Samuel 25, verse 28. When the Lord has done all he promised and has made you leader of Israel, Don't let this be a blemish on your record. 1 Samuel 25, verses 30 through 31. Abigail was not just buttering David up, stroking his ego in an attempt to get on his good side. She had divine insight from God. She had been given wisdom from God that enabled her to assess the situation and recognize that David, as God's hand-picked successor to Saul, would not want to do anything that would blemish his future reputation or dishonor the name of God. Her words and actions reveal her wisdom. From a wise mind comes wise speech. The words of the wise are persuasive. Kind words are like honey, sweet to the soul and healthy for the body. Proverbs 16, verses 23 through 24. Every aspect of Abigail's handling of this delicate and dangerous situation reveals a divinely inspired understanding of human nature and the keys to the successful mitigation of difficult circumstances. Her provision of food for David's men and her choice of words for David's ears were both divinely inspired. One of the most insightful things Abigail did that day was to get David to see things from God's perspective. She knew David would be upset, and rightfully so. She fully understood how her husband's foolish actions and words would cause David to take offense and be tempted to seek revenge. But what would God have David do? She wanted David to understand that God was working through her to prevent the unnecessary slaughter of innocent people, an action that would place a permanent blight on David's reputation. It's impossible to think about this fact and not fast forward to a future event in David's life when he failed to heed the words of Abigail. When the Lord has done all he promised and has made you leader of Israel, don't let this be a blemish on your record. Then your conscience won't have to bear the staggering burden of needless bloodshed and vengeance. 1 Samuel 25, verses 30 through 31. Years later, after David had become the king of Israel, he would have an affair with Bathsheba, the wife of one of his soldiers. And when she became pregnant with his child, he would arrange for her husband to be exposed to enemy fire on the front lines, so that he could legally take Bathsheba as his wife. And he would know what it was like for his conscience to bear the staggering burden of needless bloodshed. The words of Abigail were wise because they were godly, and they were godly because they came from the mouth of a godly woman. And we'll see that David was going to recognize the hand of God in the actions of Abigail. His God would use this woman to accomplish his will regarding David.